When a quiet black student walked into an elite math class filled with Ivy League snobs, everyone laughed, even the professors. One sneered, "Are you sure you're not here to fix the Wi-Fi?" But by the end of the lecture, that same student did something no one in the room, not even the teachers, could believe. And it left the entire university speechless. It was the first day of advanced quantum mathematics at one of the most prestigious universities in the nation, a place where legacies were born and future Nobel Prize winners were molded. The large auditorium buzzed with energy as students filed in, most of them fresh from international boarding schools, private math camps, and elite academic programs. Their resumes read like the stuff of science fiction. Multiple national awards, patents filed before the age of 16, and parents who were CEOs, diplomats, or renowned scholars. Laughter and confident conversation echoed through the air, along with the soft clinks of metal water bottles and the tapping of fingers on the latest tablets and laptops. Every student in that room knew they were supposed to be there. They carried themselves like they belonged because they did. Most were dressed in brand new blazers or crisp custom-tailored shirts. Designer bags sat beside designer shoes. Gold watches peeked out from underneath finely pressed sleeves. These weren't just students. They were the best of the best, the chosen few who would inherit powerful positions in government, technology, and finance. Professors, equally elite in reputation, walked through the room, nodding at familiar names and faces, already discussing research partnerships and early thesis ideas. And then, he walked in. The door opened with a creak. Heads turned. Conversations paused. In walked a young black student. Lean frame, skin the color of deep earth, eyes sharp yet cautious. He wore a worn-out hoodie, the kind you'd find in the clearance bin of a department store. His jeans were faded and a little too short at the ankles. His shoes? Scuffed at the edges and held together more by hope than by glue. No backpack, just a weathered brown notebook tucked tightly under his arm. He stood there for a second, scanning the room, trying to find an empty seat. The contrast between him and the rest of the class was glaring. Not a single person recognized him. He didn't walk like someone used to marble floors and ivy-covered walls. He didn't belong to any of the private clubs. He didn't have legacy status or family endowments backing his place. To the others, he looked like an outsider. From the front of the room, one of the senior professors, Dr. Whitmore, glanced up from the syllabus he was handing out. His gaze narrowed, then sharpened as he took in the boy's appearance. Dr. Whitmore was a tall, gray-haired man with a reputation for brilliance and a colder reputation for elitism. He believed in pedigree, in institutions, in bloodlines of excellence. And Jalen Carter didn't look like he belonged to any of that. "You sure you're not lost, young man?" Dr. Whitmore called out, his voice layered with polite sarcasm. "This is quantum topology, not algebra basics." The room burst into soft laughter. A few students exchanged smirks. One girl in the third row whispered, "Maybe he's here to fix the Wi-Fi." Another, seated in the back with a laptop on his knees, muttered, or "delivery." Jalen didn't react. He didn't stammer, didn't explain. He didn't roll his eyes or retreat. He just stood a little straighter, turned his chin slightly upward, and walked down the aisle, each footstep echoing slightly in the awkward silence that followed the joke. He made his way to the very front of the room, past dozens of eyes watching him like he was a walking question mark. He ignored the whispers, the half-laughs, the not-so-subtle glances. He pulled out the old wooden chair in the front row, the one no one wanted because it was too close to the board, and sat down. Slowly, he opened his notebook. Its corners were bent, and the pages were filled edge to edge with what looked like handwritten equations and diagrams. Every page seemed marked, revised, and studied. There were smudges from where the ink had bled in corners that had been taped back together. It wasn't fancy. It was lived in. His pen clicked open. He didn't look back at the others. He just focused straight ahead, his eyes already analyzing the diagram that Dr. Whitmore had started to draw on the whiteboard. Behind him, a few students still chuckled under their breath. One leaned over to his friend and whispered, "Let's see how long he lasts." But Jalen? He didn't flinch. And that silence, the one where he refused to defend himself, explain himself, or even acknowledge the room's disbelief, said more than any speech ever could. It was the kind of silence that came from years of walking into rooms where no one expected him to shine. It came from being underestimated not once, but 1,000 times. It came from solving problems alone at midnight, while others had tutors and test prep coaches. It came from grit, not just intelligence. As Dr. Whitmore continued the lecture, speaking in clipped tones and rapid mathematical terms, Jalen listened. He didn't take frantic notes like the others. Instead, he wrote slowly, thoughtfully, almost like he was editing ideas in his mind before they touched paper. Nobody knew that this was the moment he had prepared for his entire life. Back home in Detroit, he had studied advanced mathematics using free public library books, pirated PDF textbooks, and old YouTube lectures from retired MIT professors. While others partied, he studied. While others traveled, he solved equations on diner napkins during late-night shifts, helping his mother clean tables. He didn't have test prep. He had resilience. He had been admitted on a rare, full merit-based scholarship, something the university almost never awarded. The professors didn't even know his name yet, but they would, because Jalen Carter didn't come to that elite university to fit in. He came to change the game. Dr. Whitmore had a reputation, an unspoken rule whispered among upperclassmen and graduate students alike. He didn't just teach math. He tested character. Every semester, on the very first day of his notoriously brutal advanced quantum mathematics course, he would present a mathematical problem so complex, so layered in theory and paradox, that it hadn't been solved in 5 years. In fact, it had become something of a department legend, the Whitmore problem. Many students had tried. A few had gotten close. One nearly cracked part of it before realizing he'd made an error halfway through the second proof. But no one had ever solved it. Not fully. Not correctly. And Dr. Whitmore loved that. He believed it set the tone, establishing that this class wasn't for the faint of heart. It wasn't enough to be good at math. You had to breathe it, live it, think in it. He enjoyed watching students squirm, smile nervously, whisper among themselves, and ultimately fail. It was his quiet way of showing who belonged and who didn't. Today was no different. With his usual smug demeanor, Dr. Whitmore turned his back to the class and picked up a black dry erase marker. The board in front of him stretched nearly 10 feet wide, a clean canvas that would soon become a battlefield of logic and abstraction. In sharp, quick strokes, he began scribbling equations, variables, abstract functions, integrals stacked upon each other in an almost laughably complex multidimensional tensor diagram. The students watched silently, some narrowing their eyes, others already lost before he finished the second line. The more confident ones pretended to follow, but even they knew this was beyond textbook material. When he finally capped the marker, he stepped aside and gestured toward the chaotic sequence of symbols, as if unveiling a masterpiece. "Whoever solves this," he said, glancing directly at Jalen, "can teach the class." The room erupted in light laughter. Not cruel, at least not on the surface, but amused, challenged. Most assumed it was a joke, or a flex. Some students leaned back in their chairs with that all-too-familiar smirk, arms crossed, as if silently saying, "Yeah, right." Jalen, however, didn't laugh. He hadn't even looked up from his notebook during the whole thing. While others had watched in awe, trying to make sense of the unfolding chaos on the board, Jalen's pen had been steadily moving, scratching across the faded lined pages of his battered notebook. His handwriting was fast but precise, each symbol carefully placed, like the strokes of a chess grandmaster making long calculated moves. 15 minutes passed. Students tapped their pencils, whispered theories, and some even dared to make short-lived attempts on their own paper. But one by one, their confidence began to erode. The problem wasn't just difficult. It was inhuman, designed to expose the limits of even the brightest minds in the room. Then a sound. The scrape of a chair. Jalen stood. No dramatic pause. No seeking permission. No defiance either. Just calm intention. As if standing was simply the next logical step in a process he had already completed in his mind. The laughter stopped. Every eye turned to him. He walked toward the board. Not quickly, not slowly. Just naturally. like someone walking into their own kitchen to fix a cup of coffee. Calm, unbothered. Even the slight limp in his left step, barely noticeable, couldn't make him look unsure. Someone near the back whispered, "No way. This'll be fun." Another chuckled, "He's going to embarrass himself." But Jalen didn't hear it, or didn't care. He picked up the same marker Dr. Whitmore had used, rolled it once between his fingers, then uncapped it and stepped toward the board. His eyes scanned the problem for only a few seconds. Not because he was trying to understand it, but because he was aligning his own thoughts with the visual mess in front of him. Then he started writing. Not hesitantly, not in small, nervous bursts. His hand moved with practiced precision, like a pianist playing a piece he'd composed in his sleep. Symbols appeared in elegant succession. Summations, transformations, notations that seemed alien to many students in the room. But to those who recognized the advanced theories embedded in his work, something strange happened. They leaned forward. Jalen wasn't just solving the problem. He was restructuring it, reframing it into a different mathematical context entirely, using an obscure branch of abstract algebra combined with quantum matrix field theories that hadn't even been fully explored in most graduate programs. He wasn't attacking the problem head-on. He was dismantling it, bypassing complexity by shifting the framework altogether. Gasps escaped from a few students. Even the overconfident ones went silent. By the time he reached the far side of the board, finishing the last line of his solution, it had only been 7 minutes. Jalen paused, looked over it once, then quietly replaced the marker, capped it, and walked back to his seat. Silence. Absolute, pin-dropping silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed a joke or a failure. It was the kind of silence that follows a miracle. Dr. Whitmore, arms crossed, tried to maintain his usual poker face, but his expression cracked, just slightly. He walked toward the board with a stiff gait, examining each line as if expecting to find a mistake. His eyes darted across each equation, checking for inconsistencies, missing steps, or logical fallacies. But there were none. The math was sound, beyond sound. It was elegant, genius even. Professor Langston, who had been observing silently from the back of the classroom, stood up and approached the board as well. He glanced at Whitmore. "This is correct," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. Whitmore didn't respond. The room had gone from mockery to awe in less than 10 minutes. As the class sat in stunned silence, Jalen opened his notebook again. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waiting for applause. He just turned the page and began writing something new. That moment, though brief, shifted something in the room, in the minds of his peers, in the air around him. For years, the Whitmore problem had broken the best and brightest minds. Now, it had just been solved by the quiet kid in the front row, wearing old shoes and a second-hand hoodie. And no one would ever look at him the same way again. After class, the atmosphere still charged with awe. Professor Langston, the head of the mathematics department, stood silently at the edge of the lecture hall, arms folded, eyes fixed on the empty board. The rest of the students had trickled out in hushed conversations, still stunned by what they had just witnessed. A few had taken pictures of the solution before it was erased, hoping to study it later, maybe even understand it, if they were lucky. But Langston's mind was somewhere else entirely. He didn't hesitate. He signaled to Jalen, who was quietly collecting his notebook and the one pen he had used during class. "You," he said, his voice low but firm. "My office. Now." Jalen didn't flinch. He simply nodded and followed. The walk down the marble corridor of the mathematics wing was lined with portraits of legendary professors and alumni, many of whom had long since passed. Others now hailed as global leaders in theoretical physics and applied mathematics. Langston's office was at the end of the hall, large and sunlit, its walls covered in shelves stacked with journals, framed awards, and books in at least 4 languages. He motioned for Jalen to sit, then walked around the desk slowly, almost cautiously, like he was approaching something delicate and dangerous. Langston didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the edge of the desk, arms still crossed, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Where," he asked slowly, deliberately, "did you learn that technique?" The framework you use to approach the problem, it's not in any of our graduate texts. It's not in our faculty archives. Frankly, it's not even in modern literature. Jalen didn't blink. I created it when I was 16. Langston's eyebrows raised. You created it? He repeated. Jalen nodded. I couldn't afford tutors, he continued, his voice quiet but unshaken. My school didn't have advanced math classes. We barely had enough teachers. So I taught myself. I read everything I could find online. Public archives, academic leaks, translations of old Soviet and Eastern European mathematical research, even scanned notebooks from mathematicians who never published in English. I noticed patterns, concepts no one had connected before. So I started developing my own system, built from their ideas but stretched beyond them. Langston was silent for a long time. Then he sat down. I've spent 30 years in this field, he said. Published in 6 countries. Worked with Fields medalists. And I've never seen what you just did. Jalen said nothing. He didn't need to. Langston leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the ceiling. What's your story? He finally asked. Where are you from? Jalen looked down for a moment, gathering the words. Then he began. I'm from a small neighborhood on the east side of Detroit. My mom runs a diner. It's not fancy, just a few booths, a counter, and a jukebox that breaks every other week. I grew up behind that counter, wiping tables, carrying plates, and doing math on napkins between customers. We didn't have money for internet at home, so I'd stay late at the library. I memorized their closing times better than the multiplication table. He gave a small smile. At night, I'd take the notes I scribbled at the diner and rewrite them on the back of old receipts. I kept those in a shoebox. By the time I was 15, that box was full. Langston listened without interrupting. There was this one customer, Jalen went on, an old retired math teacher. He'd come in every Thursday for coffee and apple pie. One day he saw my notes and asked what I was working on. I told him I was trying to build a new theorem around imaginary vector collapses. He just stared at me like I was speaking a different language. He brought me books after that. Some were in Russian. Others were from university presses I couldn't even pronounce. He told me, if you're serious about this, don't just learn what everyone else is learning. Go deeper. Solve problems the world hasn't even seen yet. Jalen paused, looking Langston directly in the eye. And that's what I tried to do. Langston sat back, rubbing his temples like he was trying to process a riddle in real life. Why this school? He asked. Why now? I applied 3 times, Jalen replied. Got rejected twice. Third time, I sent them my own proof of a modified Riemann hypothesis. I think they finally read it. Langston chuckled under his breath. I remember that application. The committee thought it was plagiarized. It was so advanced, they didn't think a 19-year-old from a community college could have written it. I had to fight to keep it from being thrown out. That doesn't surprise me, Jalen said simply. The room fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was thoughtful, the kind of silence that preceded something important. Finally, Langston stood. You understand what this means, don't you? He said. This isn't just about solving one professor's problem. What you've done, what you are, it's rare and dangerous in the best way. But you can't hide in the back of a classroom anymore. You've already outpaced the curriculum. Jalen shrugged. I'm not here for prestige. I'm here to learn. That's all I've ever wanted. Langston walked to a shelf, pulled down a thick folder, and handed it to him. This is a research fellowship, he said. It comes with a full ride, a stipend, and access to our private lab and archives. It's not something we offer freshmen or transfers, but rules don't apply to people like you. Jalen took the folder in both hands. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression, something like disbelief or gratitude, or maybe both. But he held it back, just like he had every time someone doubted him, dismissed him, or tried to laugh him out of the room. Langston extended his hand. Welcome to the front of the field, Mr. Carter. Jalen shook it firmly. As he left the office, walking back through the long hallway of portraits, he didn't feel overwhelmed, or intimidated, or out of place. He felt ready, because for years, the world had underestimated him. The system had failed him, but he had done what no one expected. He rewrote the rules and proved that genius can come from anywhere, even from a kid solving equations on diner napkins in Detroit. The following week, just as whispers of Jalen's unbelievable classroom performance had begun to echo through the ivy-covered halls of the university, an invitation arrived. Not from a fellow student, and not even from Professor Langston. No, this one came from a trio of senior faculty members, including none other than Dr. Whitmore himself. The email was short, deceptively friendly. Jalen, we'd be honored if you joined us for the faculty seminar this Friday. We'll be holding a live demonstration on advanced mathematical problem solving. It would be a fantastic opportunity for you to share your talent with a broader audience. We hope to see you there. But beneath the surface of those polite words was a plan. A trap, carefully dressed in politeness and prestige. You see, these professors were not used to being upstaged, especially not by someone so unexpected, a student from a community college, a student who walked in without flashy credentials or connections, a student who just solved the unsolvable in front of them without breaking a sweat. It stung their pride, so they decided to strike back. The friendly math debate was anything but friendly. It was scheduled as the highlight event of the university's quarterly faculty seminar, an invitation-only showcase held in the Grand Rotunda. The audience would include not just professors and students, but major alumni donors, visiting scholars, and even a few corporate partners who sponsor research grants. It was high-profile, formal, and intimidating. Perfect, they thought, for putting the prodigy back in his place. Word spread fast across campus. Jalen Carter, the transfer student who had already shocked the mathematics department, will be going toe-to-toe with three of the most brilliant minds in the building. The room was packed on the day of the event. Students found seats on the stairs. Faculty filled the balconies. Even the dean of science was present, sitting beside a trustee who had once helped fund a quantum research initiative. At precisely 6 p.m., the seminar began. The moderator, a sleek-haired professor from the Philosophy of Science department, stepped to the center of the stage, microphone in hand, a slight smirk dancing on his lips. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly. "Tonight, we bring you something unconventional. A live problem-solving panel featuring Professors Whitmore, Chong, and Elridge versus the student who's caused quite the stir, Mr. Jalen Carter." Polite laughter rose from the crowd. Some clapped. Others whispered eagerly. "And don't worry," the moderator added, glancing at Jalen with a not-so-subtle twinkle of mischief. "We've cooked up some real challenges tonight. Let's see if the prodigy can handle them." The room chuckled again. Jalen stood at the far end of the stage, alone, a plain notebook in his hand, wearing a neatly ironed shirt and slacks. Nothing fancy, but clean and purposeful. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were alert. He knew exactly what this was. The professors took turns. Each one came prepared with a question so obscure, so deeply buried in the realms of theoretical mathematics, that even top doctoral candidates might hesitate. The problems weren't just difficult. They were cruel, intentionally vague, riddled with misleading notations, layered with historical theories rarely touched since the 1950s. The first professor, Dr. Chong, opened with a problem rooted in non-commutative ring theory, mixed with complex group actions and modular representation. He delivered it with a dramatic flair, as if unveiling a spell. The audience leaned in. Jalen didn't flinch. He asked for a whiteboard marker. For the next 6 minutes, he worked in silence. He flipped the problem, translated it into a geometric structure, then layered a tensor approximation method over it, something not even the faculty had anticipated. His movements were smooth, like a painter applying brush strokes. At the end, he drew a box around his solution, then stepped back. Applause. Real applause. The professors looked at each other. Dr. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Next came Dr. Elridge, with a problem on stochastic processes in infinite-dimensional Banach spaces. Something so abstract it made the first-year PhD students in the audience squirm. Jalen asked one clarifying question, nodded, and got to work. This time, he didn't just solve it. He improved it. He presented a simplification that reduced 6 pages of convoluted logic to 4 elegant lines. People began whispering in shock. The final challenge came from Dr. Whitmore himself. It wasn't just a problem, it was a trap within a trap. The question looked legitimate, but was, in fact, based on a flawed assumption. If approached traditionally, any solver would hit a contradiction and fail. It was a test of not just intelligence, but intuition. Jalen stepped forward again. He looked at the board, his brow furrowed, and for the first time that night, he paused. A hush fell over the crowd. But instead of panicking, he picked up a fresh marker, crossed out the false assumption at the top of the problem, and rewrote it. Then he turned to the audience. This problem, he said clearly, is built on a foundational error. The assumption violates the properties of Hilbert space projection. If we solve it as written, we chase a contradiction. But if we correct the foundation, here's what it becomes instead. Gasps rippled through the room. He rewrote the problem, reframed it, and solved it in under 8 minutes. When he finished, he put down a marker and faced the crowd. His voice was calm, but strong. I may not have come from money. I didn't go to private academies. I don't have a parent in this faculty. But let me say something clearly. He looked at the sea of faces, many of whom had once dismissed him, laughed at him, or simply ignored him. Genius doesn't belong to the wealthy. It doesn't wear expensive shoes or carry family legacy. It belongs to those who grind in silence, who build in the dark, who solve problems not because they were told to, but because they have to. The room was still. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole room, students, donors, even a few stunned faculty, rose to their feet in a roaring, uncontainable standing ovation. Even the professors, caught off guard by the thunderous applause, were forced to stand. Professor Whitmore's face was unreadable, but he clapped slowly, reluctantly, because tonight, even he had to admit, it wasn't a debate. It was a lesson, and the student they had tried to humiliate had just taught it better than any of them ever could. From that moment forward, Jalen Carter wasn't just the student who solved the unsolvable. He was the name spoken in every hallway, the standard by which others were measured. Not because he was perfect, but because he proved brilliance, like courage, doesn't come from comfort. It comes from fire. That same week, before the applause from the faculty seminar had even fully faded from memory, Jalen Carter's life began to change in ways even he couldn't have anticipated. It started with a simple email from the university's financial aid office, congratulating him on being awarded the Newton Field's full scholarship, a rare honor given only to students who demonstrate extraordinary talent in mathematics and theoretical sciences. The scholarship didn't just cover tuition, it covered everything. Housing, meals, books, research trips, even new laptop. It was the kind of support package most students could only dream of. The second email came from a department chair himself, Professor Langston. It read, "Effective immediately, we'd like to offer you a teaching assistantship for quantum mathematics. Your responsibilities will be minimal while you continue your coursework, but your input will be vital. Also, we want you to help us redesign part of the graduate problem set. Your approach to nonlinear tensor models is inspiring." Jalen sat in the small corner of the student center where he usually studied and stared at his screen in disbelief. He had gone from wiping diner counters to being asked to co-author curriculum for one of the top math departments in the country. But that wasn't all. By Friday, he received a phone call. A soft-spoken woman with a British accent introduced herself as the talent coordinator for Ecliptica Research Group, a private mathematics and artificial intelligence firm based in New York, known for solving real-world crises using cutting-edge quantitative modeling. She said they had reviewed video footage from the seminar, which had been quietly uploaded to a faculty-only channel, but somehow had leaked to the public, and the CEO himself wanted to speak with him. That weekend, Jalen was flown to New York for a private dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. The CEO, a former Fields medalist turned tech mogul, sat across from him and said bluntly, "I haven't seen a mind like yours since I was at Cambridge in the 90s. You're not just solving problems. You're inventing math. We want to bring you in, mentor you, collaborate, and let you help design the future." The offer included a part-time remote internship, a six-figure signing bonus, and access to a think tank composed of mathematicians, physicists, economists, and AI engineers from around the globe. And to think, just 2 weeks earlier, Jalen hadn't even owned a working printer. Back on campus, the whispers turned into headlines. The school newspaper led with the story. Local student solves legendary equation on first day. But it didn't stop there. The larger media caught on. First, the Chronicle of Higher Education did a deep dive profile titled The Diner Mathematician, a journey from grease-stained napkins to global equations. Then came online platforms like Medium and Wired, and soon, mainstream outlets followed. The New York Times published an op-ed, "What Jalen Carter Can Teach Us About Hidden Genius." Articles popped up with headlines like, "From Diner to Genius. How a Detroit Teen Shocked the Elite. The Boy Who Outsmarted Harvard's Best. The Quiet Kid in the Hoodie Who Rewrote the Rules." TV networks reached out. Documentarians requested interviews. Even a major streaming platform expressed interest in buying the rights to Jalen's story for a dramatized series. But Jalen, in true fashion, wasn't interested in celebrity. He turned down most of the interviews and returned to his dorm room, which now had a new desk, courtesy of an anonymous faculty donation, and a stack of books taller than his lamp. He kept studying. He kept solving. But what changed was how others saw him. In the cafeteria, students who once mocked him now nodded in respect. Professors who ignored his name now used it as a benchmark. This question, one of them said during a lecture, was based on the technique Jalen used last week. Study it. You might learn something. Jalen didn't let it get to his head. He remained quiet, humble. He still used the same old notebook, though it was now protected with a plastic cover someone had gifted him. He still called his mom every night, updating her on classes, asking how the diner was doing, reminding her to rest her bad knee. She, in return, cried every time she heard a new article had come out. She clipped them all and taped them to the kitchen walls of the diner like they were lottery tickets. Soon, the diner itself started attracting attention. People came in just to sit at the booth Jalen used to study in. Tourists asked for the Jalen Special, a plate of fries and a milkshake, which he ordered nearly every day after school growing up. Local reporters did feature stories on his mother, calling her the woman who raised a genius. But perhaps most telling of all was how the faculty changed. The very professors who had tried to embarrass him, Dr. Whitmore among them, could no longer deny what they had witnessed. Some avoided eye contact in the halls. Others attempted polite small talk, complimenting his work or inviting him to coffee chats they never would have extended before. At one point, during a joint department meeting, Dr. Whitmore stood and publicly addressed a group of faculty and students, saying, "I must admit, when Jalen first walked into my classroom, I made assumptions based on background, appearance, and my own biases. I was wrong, spectacularly wrong, and I've rarely been more grateful to have been proven so." The room clapped. Jalen, sitting quietly in the back, simply nodded. But the greatest victory wasn't applause or offers. It was the shift. Suddenly, students from underfunded schools, students from overlooked neighborhoods, students who'd always felt like outsiders, started emailing the department, asking for a chance, submitting portfolios. One girl wrote, "I saw Jalen's story. I thought maybe someone like me could try too." Jalen had become a symbol, not just of brilliance, but of possibility, of what could happen when talent is allowed to shine, when barriers are broken, when the world is forced to see what it previously ignored. And those professors, those men and women with decades of research and walls lined with accolades, they never forgot that week. The week they tried to belittle a boy in a hoodie. The week they attempted to put a young mind in its place, only to discover that place was above them. Because in the end, they weren't just watching a student. They were sitting in the presence of greatness. And they almost missed it. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.